And good morning, good morning. We are in fact live, and we're just going to sort of be here together for a moment, gathering on in. Theresa. Teresa's finding books currently.
You mean our high-tech camera lifting device?
Yes. Ready?
Yep.
We've switched sides. That's kind of disorienting.
This is the sort of high-tech that the tech you manage while you're high.
And gathering together we are. So we're going to give it a couple of moments.
In the meantime, we got our Tintoys.
We do have
and Drinky
Tintoys.
Bird.
And I have my phone going off in my pocket. I'm going to step away and turn my phone off. That's what I'm doing. You can play the Drinky Bird there for a moment.
Have you got your churro magic?
I got stuff.
All right. Good. Let's see. Come on, Drinky Bird. This is an advanced Drinky Bird. It doesn't even need anything to drink. Are you threatening the birds with you? Just a couple minutes and we'll be ready to roll here. Very fairground oriented here. Get those birds. Get them. But not really.
Let's these again.
Should I fire up the jet planes again, or?
Oh, let's do this. Let's do
Let's
this
do it.
thing.
All right, we'll get this out of the way. Thank you, Drinky Bird. Such an agreeable fellow.
That was the dramatic. That was
Dun, dun, dun.
the dramatic reveal.
Hope that that's drinkable.
It's drinkable.
She's drinking the.
So we're
offering water.
broadcasting from my upstairs altar space because it has good reception and lighting, and that's my cat drinking the sacred water from my chalice.
Well, cats are sacred, right?
She is kind of my familiar. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I guess if she wants to drink I just refreshed it yesterday. She's really just chowing down on it.
Yeah.
I guess you don't chow down on water.
Slurping down.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Morning.
Good morning. So this is now Bridge to a Better World. That's Ani. I'm Theresa, and we would like to bring some commentary and some news you're not supposed to know to the current situation. I would like to start actually with something that's been kind of knocked off of the news. I mean, aside from the pandemic, there's lots to talk about that. But I would like to bring up the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Now, you may have heard that the committee investigating January 6th has come up with a statement that they are determining and they're ready to move to the Justice Department, to the courts, to that branch of the U.S. government under the Constitution, with the assessment that Trump did indeed know what he was doing. And everyone's saying, "Oh, yeah, well, that's old news." Well, in a sense, it's not, because the process is moving forward, and I support the process in the sense that what is actually being produced is a determination that Trump will not be able to run for office. Let me explain how that works. Let me read the 14th Amendment, Section 3 first. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector or president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as member of Congress, or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States. So that's a really run-on sentence, and let me summarize. Anyone who has taken the oath cannot be a senator or representative or hold any office if they, and return to the quote, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. And I think that's an important phrase, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. And that's the end of the quote. So turning to Newsweek, for any type of obstruction or fraud prosecution, the Department of Justice would have to prove Trump's knowledge and intent. Basically, they would have to get inside the former president's head, and innocent or even negligent misrepresentation is not enough. That's where the president's lawyer, Eastman, comes in. If the January, and this is a quote of Niyama Ramani, a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Lawyers, telling Newsweek, if the January 6th committee can show that Trump knew that he lost the election, but he attempted to overturn the results anyway, you have good enough for a grand jury indictment. Witness testimony is good, and they have a lot of that already, but the best evidence is emails or text messages that cannot be refuted. That's why the committee is so eager to get Eastman's emails to and from Trump. That is the type of smoking gun evidence the Department of Justice would need to consider prosecuting a former president. And everyone's saying, well, lock him up and all that sort of thing. Well, aside from that, the most important thing, I think, is that no matter what penalty or lack of penalty is assessed through this process, he cannot constitutionally be put on the ballot. Once this process goes through, this is the end for Trump, and the Republican Party, I think, arguably has engaged in insurrection and rebellion against the United States and should not be seated in Congress. I don't expect that to go forward, but at the very least,
we get rid of.
Yeah, Trump cannot legally be put on the ballot. That'll be the end of Mr. Trump. And I really think that it should go further. And the co-conspirators, as the 14th Amendment says, those who have given aid or comfort to the enemies of the Constitution cannot be a senator or representative or any of these other offices, which is only rational. This 14th Amendment is a result of the Civil War. And after the Civil War, the amendment was presented to say, no, you can't just come right back from the Confederacy and start this whole business again, because the Confederacy had blown up over the idea of white people being able to own slaves, and had resulted in all kinds of even fist fights in Congress for decades before the actual Civil War. So they're saying, you can't just come back here and start this fight again. You're out.
And we're seeing sort of a devolution to that again, right?
Yeah.
With Marjorie Taylor Greene, with Lauren Boebert, with Gosler, with Ted Cruz, with Rubio, with the fellow whose name always escapes me,
Gilbert?
But he's very dapper. Now the young guy, whatever. On January 6th, he's like waving and smiling. I see his face. His name's Gosler, sure. Sure. Throw him into. I mean, we're seeing that devolution. We're seeing an absolute lack of civility, and we're seeing what, frankly, looked and looks like a move towards civil war. And so, uh, timely to look at the constitutional amendment that was brought forth in the first one as we try to head off a second.
Yes, I look at these behaviors and I say, okay, well, this is fascism, this is intimidation. And if you look at history, the actions and words of the people who were supporting slavery back then before the Civil War, they acted pretty much exactly the same. It's the same playbook. Just intimidate as often as well as you can and use your status. They used it as their status as senators and representatives and more than that, rich white slave owners to just do whatever they want. And they literally did beat abolitionists and pretty much get away with it. So, changing topics. The big thing right now is the war in Ukraine, the consequences thereof, the economy in danger worldwide, and frankly, the entire world in danger of thermonuclear war.
And thermonuclear accidents at this point.
And the latest from the attack on the what the Russians attacked, I want to be clear, is part of a huge nuclear power complex. What is it? 6 reactors, even bigger than Fukushima, and they attacked the training building, which in a sense doesn't matter. They attacked the complex, and it was extremely dangerous. And the fire is now put out. So we're left right now. Yeah, we're left right now with, okay, it doesn't, there's no reason those reactors would melt down at this point, but they're occupied by Russian troops. Everything's crazy, and it kind of brings to mind just, what happens when this sort of, hello, kitty cat.
Come here.
When this
let me
sort
encourage
of
you to.
happens in our society that has, all of the technical aspects and nuclear aspects in this case that could go haywire. So there are questions and there are terms being thrown about that I think have not been well defined. And by the way, we want to make clear again, I think, that we absolutely oppose, we are anti-imperialists, and we absolutely oppose the invasion. I almost said of Yugoslavia, of Ukraine.
We absolutely oppose it.
And we oppose the invasion of Yugoslavia, which seems to be forgotten. But a couple of terms that are being tossed about are cluster bombs and thermobaric bombs, vacuum bombs, fuel air bombs, this sort of thing. These are large bombs, and they are not large in terms of, they can be backpacked. So they're quite in advance, if you want to call it that, in terms of military technology. But they're not new, and the United States has them. Here's something from the Wikipedia entry on one of the USA's thermobaric weapons. Quote, the AGM-11-4N Hellfire II, first used by U.S. forces in 2003 in Iraq, uses a metal augmented charge MAC warhead, which contains a thermobaric explosive fill. It uses aluminum powder coated or is mixed with PTFE layered between the charge casing and explosive mixture. When the explosive mixture detonates, the aluminum mixture is dispersed and rapidly burns. The result is a sustained high pressure that is extremely effective against people and structures. Note that this description is not couched in terms of horror, but rather says that that the weapon is extremely effective. Funny how that happens when it's our weapon. There are variations on this. The aluminum or whatever is used to replace it can be a stratified charge powder, and that is more effective in detonating the cloud. Basically, what happens is you shoot this grenade, and it's used where there's a lot of oxygen. It's used on the ground, and it's used versus troops and can be used versus people. And it creates a big cloud of explosive mixture, which is then detonated by a second explosion. I say second explosion is they both happen faster than a second, so it's not like you can discriminate between the first and second explosions. That's how it works. So it's not particularly mysterious. It was used as they say in Iraq. Now, we are also talking about cluster bombs. They are a horror, but we're seeing comments as if cluster bombs had been utterly banned and were unheard of. That's ridiculous. The US has quite a store of cluster bombs and is producing them right now. Again, turning to Wikipedia because it's handy. Um, it was used by the the US and the UK and the Netherlands used 2,000 cluster bombs containing 380,000 submunitions dropped on Yugoslavia during Operation Allied Force in 1999. And by the way, Operation Allied Force seems to have been forgotten, and we keep hearing these comments about this is the worst thing to happen in Europe since World War II.
First time any European country's been invaded since
Civilized
World War
European
II.
country, which is a racist term, frankly. And
Frankly, it is phenomenal that we have not heard one word in the mainstream media about Yugoslavia, about any of the late 90s, war that happened. And I think that that's an interesting erasure. 1999 is not that long ago. Just going to say.
It's almost a default setting for American broadcasters at this point. I heard on corporate media, this would be the worst since Chernobyl. No, Fukushima is the worst since Chernobyl. Fukushima was 4 nuclear reactors, and it's still destroying the ocean. So this ability to forget has just gotten worse.
Well,
and worse over the years.
There's an ahistoricism, and there's also a sensationalism and hyperbole. If this is the worst, the ratings are going to go up.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a rush towards that kind of hyperbole, that kind of sensationalism, and that creates the ahistoricism. And frankly, if we were to actually remember our past, we might get a little more resistant. And so the ahistoricism works in the elite's favor. It's not going to be looked at like a problem.
All right, let me give you some more details on this. On the 7th of May, 1999, between 11:30 and 11:40 a.m. Local time, a NATO attack was carried out with 2 containers of cluster bombs and fell in the central part of the city. I think this is Belgrade. The pathology building next to the medical center of Nice in the south of the city, next to the building of Banovina, including the main market, the bus station next to the Nice Fortress, and the 12th of February Health Center, and the parking of Nice Express near the Nisava River. I'm mispronouncing that, sorry. Reports claim that 15 civilians were killed, 8 civilians seriously injured, 11 civilians had sustained minor injuries, 120 housing units were damaged, and 47 were destroyed, 15 cars damaged. Overall, during the invasion, at least 23 Serb civilians were killed by cluster munitions. At least 6 Serbs, including 3 children, were killed by bomb blitz after the operation ended, and up to 23 square kilometers in 6 areas remain cluster contaminated, according to the Serbian government, including on Mount Kaponik near the slopes of the ski resort. Little bombs that can absolutely shred you and anyone near you are still sitting, in the snow there. So much for modern weaponry. These are horrors, to be sure, but they're also our horrors. So let's be rational and real about this. And speaking of rational and real, as I think I mentioned last week, I've seen more and more references on social media, people saying, and I don't mean to be disparaging at all, but it's young people who have not been exposed to what all those old people were exposed to in the 70s and 80s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s about nuclear war. We had an understanding at some point that nuclear war was not survivable, and now I see comments like, what's the best country to go to in the event of a nuclear war? Where should I go in the event of nuclear war? And it's just like, it's a head slap. It's like, oh my God, where do we start? So I want to start on this. One of the best places to start, and one of the things that helped produce the START Arms Treaty and we have reduced the amount of nuclear weapons aimed at each other between the Soviet Union, China, and the United States, particularly, well, of course, now Russia and the United States, by 80%. But we had more than 100 times enough to destroy the planet. So that 20% still remaining it doesn't matter in a sense. We haven't gotten to the point where any usage of nuclear weapons would be survivable. So before I get into some of these details, I want to summarize what we learned from Jonathan Schell in that book, The Fate of the Earth, that was so effective and well read around the world and now apparently forgotten. And that is that there's no such thing as a little bit of nuclear war. There's there are sensors across the planet that are set to detect a nuclear explosion. It's very distinctive. On radio waves, it makes it sound something like because it's in a sense it's a transmitter. It's very distinctive and it is automatically detected. At this point, we hear that Putin has put his forces on alert, and it's been determined that it's a relatively low-level alert, and apparently he's bluffing. But the question is, how crazy is he? Because nuclear war would not be survivable, not for him, and not for Russia, not for the United States, and not for the world. And this is something that can be determined by the mathematics, but it's also one of those things in which the frame has been lost. For example, I see comments that, we wouldn't necessarily have a nuclear winter, maybe you've heard that term, because when Nagasaki was attacked, there was no firestorm. And the firestorms that nuclear weapons produce are part of the nuclear winter scenario, a scenario in which the entire planet's general temperature is reduced by at least 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Glaciers begin to move, and it is impossible to raise crops. It's part of the reason why we'll all die if this starts. But that's just unscientific and frankly silly, because the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki at this point is so small by comparison to the thousands of nuclear weapons that are on alert that it is considered a tactical nuclear weapon. This is a little bitty one, this city-destroying bomb, and it flashed off of the terrain and did not start a firestorm. The dozen or so nuclear bombs that are aimed at this city and at your city and all cities will certainly start a firestorm beyond imagination. That's in addition to the fact that it will immediately blast, megatons, millions of tons of material up into the upper atmosphere and start blocking sunlight. But the fires will not be survivable. The radiation will not be survivable. There's talk of, if you can just stay out of the fallout for 48 hours, you'll be all right. That's absurd. And the scenarios in which those ideas are produced are just dishonest. They're based on this fantasy of a limited nuclear war. As I said, the first one that goes off, even a small one, a tactical one, a city destroyer like the one that destroyed Nagasaki or Hiroshima, will set off the sensors all over the world. All nuclear weapons will be brought to bear, and if not immediately launched. And the Russians particularly have set up systems and threatened with systems that are set to automatic launch in the event of nuclear war.
And that was all about the mutually assured destruction, which was how we weren't going to actually use any of the weapons that depleted the public coffers every year, so that we could not have any, social programs.
There was a thing called the civil defense. Civil defense bunkers? They didn't say bunkers. Fallout shelters. That's what I'm trying to think of. And every now and then, in an old building, you can see the old symbol saying fallout shelter, and online you can find the 60-year-old cans of crackers and water and that sort of thing. The idea was that you're going to hide in the fallout shelter, and this was something that actually might have worked at the very beginning of the atomic age, when the Soviet Union only had a few dozen nuclear bombs and had to deliver them by bomber and didn't have ICBMs. That ended in the late 50s. That's how long that's been with the orbit of Yuri Gagarin. That was the message, actually. It wasn't just Yuri Gagarin and the triumph of putting someone in orbit around the planet, something that the US wasn't able to replicate for years. Uh, but I mean, Alan Shepard was not even an orbital flight. It was a clear statement to the United States that a capsule big enough to carry a man and his survival supplies could be orbited around the planet. In other words, their rockets are so big that they could drop nuclear bombs on the U.S. That was the intent, and it was accepted and understood. That was the India idea of being able to survive it, and especially the production of thousands of nuclear weapons that exist on the planet today, and in the ground, on rail cars, on trucks, in submarines, on aircraft, in ICBM rockets. No, we cannot have one nuclear bomb go off anywhere ever. Period. And so I'll turn it over to your comments with that. I hope that that's clear. And it's not something that is a matter of speculation. The math can be done and was done. Literally, the math was done by Jonathan Schell. And no, you won't live through that. There's absolutely no way.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I need to comment much further than what you've already done. I mean, you've laid it out there. But it goes back to that ahistoricism, right? The last generation that really grew up with the shadow of the Cold War was Gen X. We're 2 generations down. It's something that we haven't really had to talk to our kids about, right? Because many people kind of thought, there's a lot of other existential crises going on at the moment. At least we don't have the Cold War. At least we're not on the brink of mutually assured destruction. Even if those weapons never went away, they're not in the forefront of our minds. We haven't been saber rattling with them. But they never went away. And now they are saber rattling. And it's time to remember and to teach those that haven't been brought up under the shadow of nuclear war what that actually means. It's more horrific than we could talk about. It's what Theresa was describing. And there are many resources out there. There are movies galore. But there are books also about talking to kids about nuclear war. Just look back in the 70s and 80s. That's when they were written.
Jonathan Schell's book is a big reason why nuclear war simply hasn't broken out, and countries around the world, people around the world understood that you just can't use these. They're there as a counter threat.
Right. Strange game. The only way to win is not to play.
Yeah, and the only possible use for them is frankly, if the Russians were to launch their nuclear weapons in a full-out nuclear war, or any nuclear use really, I would be against launching back. What's the point? I mean, if once you're vaporized, only revenge is left, and we have to pretend that we want to launch back for that bloody, stupid, pointless revenge, so that they're all poisoned and vaporized too. That's how crazy it all is. But I feel that the understanding is beginning to loosen, and that is a terrific danger. That and this idea amongst survivalists, but more importantly, amongst many elite, the idea that their bunkers are extensive enough and secret enough that they're going to be able to get in those bunkers. Who knows, they might be able to cram themselves in there at the last minute and survive for who knows how long, while the rest of the human race and the entire ecosystem of the planet is destroyed. That's madness. And that's a real danger when people think that, maybe as a last resort and just to show them, by golly, we'll set the whole planet to burning and I'll hide in this bunker. Well, let's fill in those bunkers because no one should have the option of destroying the planet and hiding in a bunker. It's all of us or none of us. And I'm
all in this together, you say?
Yes. We'll all glow together when we glow,
yes. Well, you got more?
I think I've made that point. I hope I've made that point.
All right.
And I hope that you listening will find a copy of Fate of the Earth or the equivalent online. I was using MIT study on the effects of nuclear weapons, and accidentally printed off 20 pages of it. And I'm looking at the what do you call the where they magnify part of the text so
Or
that you
the
know it's
section
sort of a
headline.
chapter header. The intense heat can ignite fires and cause severe burns on exposed flesh as far as 20 miles from a large detonation. And as I was saying, there would be thousands of such detonations, and then the fun really starts.
20 miles, you say?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't really have a whole lot more to add, except for the fact that things really are horrific. And that is kind of, there's a little cognitive dissonance going on because we're heading into spring, right? In just a couple weeks, we will hit spring equinox. And this is the time that the year and the world renews, regenerates. And we talk about, uh, you know, um, how we're going to do things differently.
It's a good time to think about peace and peace efforts.
It is an actually wonderful time to think about peace. When isn't a good time to think about peace? But about peace, to start it right here at home. Um, Bunkers are an illusionary safety. Good for tornadoes, maybe. Yes, I agree, Jabara. Tornadoes, storms in general. Climate change is still one of those existential threats. Maybe we could look at community resource bunkers. Um, we can look at how to do things differently as the world renews this spring, as we work to co create it. But to do that, we really have to be awake. We really have to move into it with consciousness and with our eyes open.
And if I could just jump here and make a comment, our leaders need to do this too. And right now we've got a scene in which we've got a scenario which I like to call "Let's you and him fight." We're setting up the Ukrainian people to do a last-ditch defense against an anti-civilian war, which is a horrible thing. So if that's the case, and if the Ukrainian people really want to do this, and I don't blame them. I mean, I can understand that attitude, but the U.S. should be trying the best they can to protect those civilians. The best thing to do would be to put something on the table right now to present to Putin and say, here's a good reason to stop this war. And fortunately, we have some demands from Putin, which have not been addressed at all. And some of these demands are just nothing. One in particular, the idea that no missiles can be put on Ukrainian territory, I say, yes, that's just fine. Who the hell needs missiles on Ukrainian territory? As I said, they've been intercontinental since the late 50s. Don't need missiles there by any stretch of the imagination. It's just only to be belligerent that we put missiles there, only to flip off Putin will we do that. So let's put that on the table right now. Hey, stop this war, Putin. And not only will we reverse these sanctions, but we won't put any missiles on Ukrainian territory. What do you say? That's an easy one. That's nothing. But we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is more belligerence from the U.S. and a whole lot of, hooray, hooray, flag waving. Hooray for the Ukrainians. Okay, yeah, I think this bravery is terrific. It's inspiring. Who could not feel that way? But how about let's not let them die? Let's actually negotiate for peace. So I wanted to get that put in there. I mean, there's some other things that could easily be put on the table as well, but that's a start. That's just an example.
Absolutely. Oh, just to do the thing that I think we're supposed to. It's that thing that all streamers say, right? Hit the like button and subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel, and it helps it kind of be easier to find for others. So do please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I was going to say that during these times it's really super easy to get turned off to the news and to just shut down, and we really can't do that. We do have to actually take care of ourselves and sort of limit our doom scrolling, to know when is enough and when we're just sort of getting sort of energy off of being horrified. And that's not healthy. That's sort of like junk food snack energy, a little now and then. But, by and large, read the news and then do something. And my tarot reading this week basically is reflecting that it is the antidote to despair is action, and it is in time. It is the time to really do something. We're moving from a state of relative comfort that we have, if not been, luxuriating, we haven't been particularly uncomfortable. And we don't really want to rock that boat so much, to take in the horror that we are knocking on the door of nuclear disruption. If not war, then bombs around nuclear installations and energy plants, cause devastation as well. And so we haven't, I don't think we've really had time, in the last couple of weeks to take in these new horrors on top of the pandemic, on top of the already existing existential crisis of climate change. And so we keep going, and we kind of just want to hold those things at bay. But we really do have to accommodate those realities into our consciousness, and we have to actually take action. Actually, take action is one of my least favorite repetitive terms, and yet I use it so often. We have to take action
Actively,
actively in this moment.
actively, actually.
Mm. Um, we have a tendency to really want to wall off, and it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take a day off of the news. It's okay, to do nothing but cuddle with your cat and drink cocoa for days at a time. Really, take care of yourself, because first you need to do that. But once you do that, move forward and take action. So the cards I got for this week's reading, and I disappeared earlier in the stream because I took my cards away. I put them down somewhere. But what we have, oh,
Oh, you
don't,
photograph them.
don't be flipping over yet, photograph. What we have is the Six of Pentacles, which is a card of abundance and comfort, also generosity to make sure that we share the comfort we have with those in need. And then we also have the Four of Cups, which is in this particular deck. Um, it is my kitty deck. I don't know. I had a Spanish teacher in a Zoom class that would always try to show us things on her phone. It was sometimes helpful, sometimes not. Okay, it looks like that. That's what it looks like. The Four of Cups inverted in this deck talks about disappointment. Talks about sort of numbness, really, shutting oneself off because of life's disappointments. And then we get into um, the card of the High Priestess, also inverted, which talks about not stepping into your own authority, basically, not unraveling your own mysteries. And so together, it's really time to go deep and to know yourself all the further. I had tweeted last week about what you would do if you knew you only had a few days left to live, a week left to live, a month left to live. As no one is guaranteed tomorrow, and in these very uh, interesting times, in these very unsettling times, it's potentially a good thing to really contemplate. How do we how do we act if we actually have in our consciousness that life is limited, that we aren't guaranteed tomorrow? How do we act? How do we treat each other? And what do we do? I'm not saying that we need to acquiesce to the fact that we're, all about to die in thermonuclear war, or that climate change is irreversible and will kill us all. I'm not quite ready to acquiesce to these things, right? Because I think action is still needed. We need to actually move into a way where we can affect our communities and where our actions make a meaningful difference. I have a hard time saying what to do to stop the war. We can show up in the streets. We can show up in the streets by the billions.
Veteransforpeace.org is organizing a demonstration in Portland. I want to say it's on the 14th, but I'll go to that website and or to the local website and figure out exactly when that's happening. But I think that there needs to be such gestures in the United States, and we are going to have to get the attention of our great leaders, because they are taking the attitude of that they are just doing the right thing now, and they want to see how the war goes. Well, I think they need to be a lot more proactive than that. And as I was saying before, they need to get out there and make some offers, serious offers on the table to stop this war. I think that one of Putin's demands was to remove NATO, the possibility of NATO expanding into Ukraine. This is something that was constantly presented to Zelensky. It was one of the reasons, the hope for that, and for more substantial aid from the West, is one of the reasons Zelensky agreed to turn his face away from the Nazi militias as the U.S. built them up. It was the hope for a good outcome, I guess, or that's how he would view it. So Putin blew that. I know that. I mean, I don't think there's any chance now that NATO would withdraw this procedure if there's any Ukraine to deal with at all. That's not something that would be offered. But as I said, having no missiles in Ukraine could easily be an offer. And NATO expansion in general was a betrayal of promises made to the remainders of the Soviet Union and to what became Russia and the other states, and to Ukraine. Ukraine also has been betrayed by Putin because they turned over their nuclear weapons with the guarantee that they would not be invaded. So there's betrayal on both sides, but there needs to be efforts towards peace on both sides, certainly. Proactive efforts. And I want to hear if our Congress and our president doesn't want to present serious peace offers, I want to know why. What's their logic? And there hasn't, as I said before, there hasn't been anything approaching a plebiscite, even an offer for participation in terms of a democracy. There is no democratic input whatsoever towards this lack of a peace process. Why is the American people's voice absolutely absent? Why is the process not? Where is there no process? These are questions that we must present. Otherwise, the vacuum will be sufficient to allow U.S. military and social policy to go forward the way that it is in Ukraine. And I almost said Yugoslavia again. I guess it's all coming back. We need our memory.
Well, and so speaking of groups doing things, pjw.info is the website for Peace and Justice Works. And I would suggest that people contact Peace and Justice Works. I find information on their website. Like there are peace efforts in the area and weekly vigils to check into. PJW is not directly involved in organizing most of these events, but their inclusion here is meant for information, and here is the Peace and Justice website. Their Stand for Peace and Justice Visibility Action, 4:30 to 5:30 at the east end of the Burnside Bridge in Portland. That's a weekly thing that began in 2014. It was suspended for a while for COVID. It may well be happening again. Check it out. 4:30 to 5:30 east end of the Burnside Bridge in Portland.
I want to say about
Wednesdays.
Go ahead.
That's on Tuesdays. Sorry, Tuesdays. Let me just sort of get through this list.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Wednesdays in Beaverton, 6 o'clock. at Southwest 5th and Hall across from the Beaverton Library. On Fridays, the Rally and March for Peace and Justice in Portland at 5. That has been happening for quite some time. Um, it's helpful if you contact PJW if you plan to attend. So you might want to contact PJW, uh, Peace and Justice Works, uh, if you're planning on attending a rally and march. That would be tonight at 5. Contacting the Peace and Justice Works office it's a good local contact. I just have to say. Saturdays, Portland Stand for Peace, Lloyd Center Vigil. It was suspended in March of 2020 for COVID reasons, so we don't know about that. Check into the website and look around, and it's time to revive the peace efforts. Really has been astonishing to me how hard it has been to talk about peace in these last 20 years since 9/11. It has been extremely hard to talk about peace efforts. And so,
Yeah, we've been effectively beaten down and frightened, I think. But I want to say about it.
Veterans for Peace, again, just
Yeah,
underscoring their fine work.
yeah. Well, I want to say about activism generally that it's not healthy if you can avoid. I understand getting depressed about the state of things, but we were never guaranteed one more second of consciousness. We are gloriously alive at this moment and able to contemplate ourselves and the universe. That is what we have. And we must take the attitude that life moves forward and find ways for it to do so. There have been times in the past where it looked pretty bad, and we got to the other side of it. One of my little areas of study is the Second World War and just how bad things were and how ugly the attempt by the Germans and the Japanese governments was to enslave the world. That was literally their intention. It's not just a propaganda statement. They believed themselves to be racially superior, and they intended to enslave the world so that their few racially superior citizens could, conquer air and space. And that was a horror that moved forward rapidly and initially with great success. The Japanese literally had an empire over much of Indonesia and China, and they very nearly succeeded. The Germans very nearly succeeded as well, and we got past that through terrific sacrifice and through the belief that even if there was a possibility of succeeding, people were willing to throw their lives into stopping that horrible outcome, that fate worse than death. And so we have this fate that is death approaching us, and we must also struggle against it. And there is life, and there's greater living in that struggle, and it is something that sustains me. So I'm not going to let go of that. And if I fail, I fail. But struggling against global warming, against corporate dominance, which is another form of that sick ideology that some people deserve
Well,
more life than others.
global dominance brings us climate change. Global dominance brings
Corporate
us.
dominance.
I'm sorry, corporate dominance brings us the climate change and many of the other ills we talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea that, however you want to define it, these educated, rich, well-off, and frankly usually white people have the right to just move forward their plans and screw everyone else. Nope, that's a sick ideology. It has to stop now. So I'm ready and willing to move forward, and I hope that you feel the possibilities and the invigoration of the activism itself.
Right. So if I could get back to
Let's get back to
what
that.
I was saying.
Yeah.
So in that tarot reading, it's time to push past those comfort zones, uh, and also remember to take care of ourselves. It's a delicate balance, right? We want to make sure that the comfort zone isn't a false sense of security based on numbness, based on being an ostrich, but is in fact us knowing that life is sweet and that love is the strongest force in the universe, and that we have precious, precious moments full of beauty with each other. But let us do that in an aware state. Um, and to that end, let us know ourselves and celebrate our lives and celebrate each other. And that is, I think, uh, a much more uh, meaningful way to move through our lives. We have also um, to know that it is time to take action. We talked about um, the various peace efforts, Vets for Peace, Peace and Justice Works. We also should look at, as John mentioned, the larger NGOs. If you can support uh, larger organizations that are able to make a difference someplace around the world, then that is also a way to take action. If you are able only to take action in your own community, uh, that is where we have often the most impact. First in our lives, then our houses, then our communities. So how can we help our neighbors? How can we make change here? And how can that ripple out? What can we do to organize our own backyards and have that change of consciousness affect the rest of the world? It is, in fact, time to take action, and that not to be distracted, but to sort of commit to doing something. Because the only way through this dark time is, in fact, to go through it. And we're together, we have each other, we have love, we have caring, compassion, and empathy. And that's a hell of a lot, actually. And the only way, again, to get through this is to move forward and to do it together, to take care of each other. And let us know how we can support you and what you're doing with our live streams. And let's be in this together.
Have to agree.
Do you have anything else?
I'm very interested in what's happening around the world, and I'm inspired to think that after all these years, Veterans for Peace is still active and still making their thing happen. So I'm just let's see what happens. Interesting times. May you live in interesting times. It's said to be a curse. Well, here we
are. Well, and that's about it. We have so much violence in our society. We really do need to increase the peace. And I'm talking here at home, as well. There have been, was it a dozen? A dozen shooting deaths in Portland since the beginning of this year. This is March 4th, right? We're not that far into the year.
And yet things can be done about it. And I would like to shout out to Joanne Hardesty for her effective plan. I was skeptical at first, but in fact, my neighborhood's shootings have decreased directly after traffic calming efforts were put into place. And I think that in this case, the correlation does have to do with causation. And it's nice not to hear those, frankly, those little bastards going around in Honda Civics shooting at each other has stopped. And I'm very happy about that. So thank you, Joanne. And I believe that I can speak for Ani in saying that we support Joanne's reelection effort.
Oh, you can absolutely speak for me in saying that. I'll speak for myself. I love Joanne. Joanne's awesome. Have I agreed with each and everything she's done? Yeah. Would I agree with each and everything anyone on the city council has done over the last? No.
But
Can't imagine I
awesome.
would.
And she's one of
She's
the
awesome.
most sincere politicians I've ever encountered.
And so with that, shall we go ahead and
sign off?
Yes, let's do that thing.
All right. Well, love y'all. Thanks so much for commenting. I love to read the comments. And I guess it's time to wrap it up. Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.
See you next week.
Bye. End stream.